Hey everybody, and welcome back to Lindsey's Little Library. So we get a bonus video today. Well, because why not? In celebration of my 40th birthday today, I thought I would tell you or give you a list of my 40 favorite books of all time. This was really hard to do. I probably could have made 80 books, but I narrowed it down to 40. I went with my gut. I am going to tell you them in order, which I usually don't commit to an order, but I did it this time, so here goes. First one I'm going to talk about, number 40, is Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. I probably checked this out of my elementary school library 47 times while I was there. I love this book. I have a copy of it somewhere in this house, and I couldn't find it. But I love this book. This is like, when I think about my kind of childhood, this is the book that I think about. So Where the Sidewalk Ends, awesome, fun poems by Shel Silverstein. Number 39, Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. This was the first Kate Morton book that I read, and this is what made me fall in love with Kate Morton. I love the dual timelines. I love the multiple perspectives. I love the mystery aspect of every one of her books. So this one follows a girl who is abandoned on a ship headed for Australia in 1913. She's totally alone. She has nothing but a suitcase with some clothes in it. And so the dockmaster and his wife adopt her and raise her as their own until she is 21, and then they tell her the truth, and then she goes off to try to figure out where she came from. This also follows Cassandra. She takes up the search for Nell after Nell's death. She's the little girl that was left behind, and tries to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. It's just fantastic. I know it's a big chunky book, but you go through it so fast. It's lovely. I loved it. 38. I know this is kind of low on the list, but it's just where it ended up. Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Just read this year. This follows our main character, Addie LaRue, who in the 1700s, she is just kind of growing up, and you know, the tradition is she's supposed to find a husband and go marry off and have kids, and she doesn't want to do that. She's just not there for that. So she makes a deal with a god after dark, which she's told not to, but she does, and basically she's allowed to live forever, but no one's ever going to remember her. Until one day, somebody does. It is one of the most beautiful books I have ever read. It is fantastic. I love it. Read it. So number 37 is These Is My Words, and I can't think of the author at the moment, but it's right here. The reason I love this book, this is one of the first books I read, written in a diary format and in kind of her own limited education, so that's why it's called These Is My Words, and just kind of her life growing up in the 1800s. Loved this book. Loved it. Number 36, we have Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This was my first Christina Lauren book that I read, and still my favorite. This follows our main characters. We have Macy and Elliot. We have dual timelines. So we have back when Macy and Elliot were inseparable best friends, and then we have present day where they're no longer, there's no connection whatsoever, and they end up kind of randomly seeing each other. And so we're trying to figure out what happened in between that led them to not really talking to each other anymore. I thoroughly believe everyone needs an Elliot in their life. Elliot is one of my favorite characters of all time, but it is a fantastic book. Christina Lauren is they're a dynamic duo. They're fantastic. So love that one. Number 35 is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I have no clue where my copy is, because with a lot of my books that I love, I loan them out and sometimes don't get them back. But Beartown is a book about hockey, which, why would I ever like a book about hockey? But I did. It is a drama-filled what would you do situation. So we have a small town, very small town that centers around hockey, and around the kind of high school hockey team is kind of what they hang their hats on. And so the star hockey player is accused of raping the coach's daughter. And it goes from there. It's a fantastic book. There are so many one-liners that Frederick Bachman put in that book that are just mind-blowing. It's amazing. Number 34 is a nonfiction. So we have 40 Autumns. Again, authors next to me. So this follows what happened to this author's family as they were kind of as the Berlin Wall went up, and some of them were on one side of it and some of them were on the other side of it, and how life really was and what happened there. So very eye-opening, amazing book. It is a nonfiction written like a fiction, which I thoroughly enjoy those books, but highly recommend that as well. Number 33, I have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Absolutely love this book. So this follows our main character, Evelyn Hugo. She is the Hollywood movie icon, but she's kind of turned into a recluse. She's not really out and about anymore. She's retired from her career, and she finally finds one reporter who isn't really well known, and she basically says, if you come over, I will tell you my life story. And she does, and she goes through her 7 husbands and what happened and how they met and the stories behind it, and it is such a fantastic book. I love it. My favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid right there. Then we have number 32. This is my favorite Susan Meisner book, Secrets of a Charmed Life. This takes place, again, dual timelines. Are you sensing a pattern here? We have an American scholar, Kendra, who is really pursuing her vision of a perfect life. She interviews Isabel McFarland. She's an elderly woman, and she's basically ready to spill all the tea. She's ready to give up all of her secrets about the war that she's kept for decades, beginning with who she really is. So then we go back 1940s England, basically during the Blitz. Hitler is raging war upon London, and thousands of children are sent to the countryside to foster homes, and this follows our main characters. We have Emmy and her younger sister Julia, who find refuge in a cottage in the country, and things happen, and it is so fantastic. I love it. Next one I want to talk about is The Huntress by Kate Quinn. I love this book, World War II historical fiction. We have multiple perspectives in this one. And basically we follow Ian Graham as he is kind of hunting down and bringing Nazis to trial. And this really focuses on finding the person deemed the Huntress. I don't want to say much more than that. It is just, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. If you like historical fiction, pick that one up for sure. Number 30, we have my favorite Riley Sager. We have Lock Every Door. I feel like this is an unpopular favorite one of Riley's books, but this is my favorite one. So it says, no visitors, no nights spent away from the apartment, no disturbing the other residents, all of whom are rich or famous or both. So Jules is desperately searching for a new place to live. She's been, I think, just sleeping on one of her friend's sofas in New York City, and she knows she can't stay there forever. So she answers this advertisement in the newspaper basically saying, come and be an apartment sitter and we'll pay you a ridiculous amount of money. And she's kind of like, this might be too good to be true, but she goes to the interview anyways, and she ends up kind of getting the gig. And it goes from there, because there's some crazy rules involved, but she's desperate, and it's insane. And I loved it. Number 29 is more nostalgia than anyways. This is super old copy. It was my great grandfather's book. It's Mrs. Mike. It's the story of Catherine Mary Flanagan by Benedict and Nancy Friedman. Kind of a romance that takes place, I want to say 1800s. A woman leaves New York or Vermont to go to Canada to, I want to say, be a teacher. She ends up meeting a bounty, and there's a bit of a romance from there. It's just one of the first like adult books that I read. It was a book that my grandmother gave me that her father had read, so it's just more sentimental than anything, but it's on the list. Number 28 is The Life We Bury by Alan Eskins. This one follows our main character, who is a college student. He has to write a paper basically about, he has to interview a stranger and kind of tell their life story. So he decides, he waits to the very last minute, goes to the nursing home that's down the street and kind of asks like, hey, I need a person to talk to. And so they introduce him to a man who is out on parole just because he is, because of his age and his health, but he has spent the last 30 years in prison for murder. And so he starts going through this interview process and starts learning about what happened, and all of a sudden is digging into what he thinks is a wrongful conviction. So there are, again, a lot of one-liners and quotes in this book that I still think about today. That was just fantastic, and I highly, highly recommend that one. Number 27 is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This is a fun contemporary full of snarkiness and humor and some serious issues, and it's just a fun like palate cleanser and one of my first Abby Jimenez books, and now I'm obsessed with her. But we follow our two main characters who have like a love to hate relationship. Their best friends are marrying each other, and so they're kind of forced to spend some time together. And of course it goes from there. It's just, the snarkiness is just on point. I loved it, loved it. Number 26 is The Help by Catherine Stockett. I wish Catherine Stockett would write more books. But this one is set in 1962, Jackson, Mississippi. We are following a couple of characters, and so we have Minnie, she is a black nanny for a white family. We also follow Skeeter, who's returned from college, and she's a journalist or aspiring journalist. She wants to write a book, and she kind of sees an opportunity to talk to Minnie and Abeline, who's also a nanny for another white family, and kind of understanding the help and their perspective and what they're going through. And it just goes from there, and it's so fantastic. The movie was fantastic. I love, love, love this book. I've read that a couple times. The next one I want to talk about, number 25, is The Light Between Oceans. This book has all the feels. And so you have this couple who is living on this little island out off the coast of Australia, where they are maintaining the lighthouse there, and they have been trying for years to have a child, and it's just heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And then after a stormy night, there is a boat found that has washed ashore. The man in the boat is dead, and there is a baby in the boat that's alive. And so they're so isolated that it's not like they can just hop on a ferry and take the baby in. They have to take care of it until the next supply run comes, and they end up raising the baby as their own. And you go from there. It's just fantastic. The next book, what number are we on? Number 24, we're getting there, is Room by Emma Donoghue. This follows 5-year-old Jack, and room is his world. That's all he has ever known, is this little like 10 by 10 room. It's where he was born, where him and his mom eat, sleep and play and learn. And you quickly, this is written from Jack's perspective, so it's written from the perspective of a 5-year-old, so it kind of takes a little bit of time to get used to just the writing and what he calls things and how he's explaining things, but you quickly realize that Jack's mom has been kidnapped and is being held in this room. So different perspective, really interesting, heartbreaking book, but yet very good. Number 23 is The Life She Was Given by Ella Marie Wiseman, my first Ella Marie Wiseman book and my favorite Ella Marie Wiseman book. So this takes place in 1931, again, historical fiction. We have Lily, who is basically locked in the attic. She gets little glimpses of the outside world, sometimes maybe can go outside at night, but she's being locked away, and we don't really know why, other than there's some sort of deformity to her that her parents are so embarrassed about that they keep her locked in this attic. Until one night her mom comes and says, hey, we're gonna go to the circus. She's all excited to finally get outside and go with her mom, which is all she's ever wanted to do, only to find out that her mom is actually selling her to the circus. Heartbreaking yet awesome. It's a fantastic book. Next one I have is Red Hill by Jamie McGuire. A little off the beaten path for me because it's about basically a zombie apocalypse, which is so not my style, but I really, really liked it. So we have Scarlett. She's raising 2 daughters all by herself. She is a nurse at a hospital, and so she sees like the beginnings of some sort of something happening where people are being basically turned into zombies. So she quickly leaves, which kind of is a little sad, leaves, gets her kids, and they go kind of to this, I want to say it's like her boss's like second home or vacation home or whatever on Red Hill, and they basically quarantine themselves there to try to survive this zombie apocalypse. It's crazy. It's fantastic. Very well written. I really enjoyed it. If you aren't totally into that kind of paranormal book, I would suggest this is a good place to start. All right, another historical fiction. We have Brutus Salt of the Sea. My favorite Brutus book. This follows, I want to say 4 teenagers, winter of 1945, as they are basically on a trek to get to the Wilhelm Gustave, which is a ship that promises safety and freedom. So it's their journey to get to the ship, and then what happens when they get to the ship. It is a quick read. I love these short chapters. They're fantastic. And I was lucky enough to meet her, so I have a signed copy. Just saying. Another favorite. Along the same lines, I have Refugee by Alan Gratz. This follows 3 kids in 3 different time periods. So we have Joseph, who's a Jewish boy trying to flee in the 1930s from Nazi Germany. We have Isabel, who's a Cuban girl in 1994, again trying to flee Cuba. And we have Mahmoud, who's a Syrian boy in 2015, again trying to flee Syria. And it follows each of their stories. Really, really good book. If you are looking for a good YA book for your kids, I highly suggest this one. So many lessons in that book. And of course, we're gonna go to number 19. We're halfway there. Can't do my list without Gunkel. Gillian Flynn, she's my lady. She got me into the psychological thriller genre. This is jump started that, I'm sure it did for a lot of other people. If you don't know, this follows our main character. What is his name? I can't think of it. Nick. He's basically accused of murdering his wife. He didn't do it, trying to prove how he didn't do it. He's not the best kind of guy in the world, so we definitely have some suspicions, but it's just fantastic. Number 18, we have All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. This follows the story of Weve and her relationship with Kellen. So Weve, I want to say she's 12 maybe. Her parents are drug dealers. She has to take care of her 8-year-old brother. Her life is not that great. Kellen is one of her dad's friends. He sees the lack of support, caring, he sees a void, and he kind of takes over and helps get Weve to school, helps Weve with her brother, and they form this really unique relationship, and it kind of goes through what that relationship turns into. It's a book I can't believe I like as much as I like, if that makes any sense at all. Back to another couple historical fictions. So this one is, what are we on? Number 17, Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. This basically takes, for any of my other, 40-year-old friends, the Oregon Trail game that we used to play in elementary school and puts it into a book form. So this follows the May family as they head out in 1853 on the Oregon Trail to head to, I want to say they're going to California. It really centers around Naomi and how she is surviving this with her family and what happens with her. It's so good. The first 6 pages is just, what a way to start a book. Number 16 is The Secret Life of CeCe Wilkes. This is by Diane Chamberlain. It's one of the first Diane Chamberlain books that I read, and it is so good. Little mystery involved, a little what would you do in her situation. So CeCe Wilkes ends up being kind of unfortunately put into a really horrible situation where a crime has been committed. There is an infant that needs taking care of, and she is faced with a really horrible choice of what to do. And it goes from there. Diane Chamberlain is fantastic and brilliant, all of that stuff. Next one I have, another historical fiction, Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. This really centers around the Tennessee Children's Home Society scandal in 1939 and Georgetown. And so we follow the family, Real Foss and her 4 siblings, and what happens when they're basically kidnapped and put into this children's home. And then we have present day in South Carolina, where this Avery Stafford, our main character, is trying to understand or uncover a little bit of a mystery that involves her family. So fantastic book. Oh my gosh, I can't praise that book enough. I love it. Next one I have is Safe Haven by Nicholas Sparks, which Nicholas Sparks is kind of hit or miss. I used to read all of his books wholeheartedly all of the time. Now it's kind of hit or miss, and Safe Haven's definitely my favorite one. It follows our main character as she is attempting to escape a very abusive relationship and goes on the run. It's got some romance, of course. It has some surprises, and it's just so fantastic. I really enjoyed that book. Another nonfiction for you, Weve Educated by Tara Westover. This is her memoir of growing up basically in a family that lived off of the grid and ending up going to, did she go to Brigham Young and Cambria? So she ended up kind of pulling herself up by her bootstraps and moving on. I know there's a lot of controversy around this book with different accounts of what actually happened, but the overall premise of how she was raised and then what she did with herself is fantastic and inspiring, and I love that book. Next one I have is the very first Simone St. James book that I read is The Broken Girls. We have dual timelines, we have historical fiction, we have a ghost. It is like the epitome of the perfect Lindsey book, basically. So we have Vermont 1950, and there is a boarding school called Idlewild Hall, which I can still very clearly picture in my mind, and it follows some girls who went there, and it's the girls who go to the school are kind of troublemakers. They're a little rough, and so it follows what happened with them. And then we have present day, we have Fiona trying to figure out what really happened to her sister, and then mix in this ghost of Black Mary, and she is creepy, and it is so fantastic. The next one is another book that I actually just finished. It's The Gunkel. I can't think of the author right now, but this one is so lighthearted yet heavy yet funny, and oh, it's just so awesome. So it basically follows our main character, Pat, and he is an actor, retired actor, kind of a recluse, hanging out by himself, and his sister-in-law just passed away, who he was very, very close with, and his brother basically says, okay, you know, I really need you to take your niece and nephew for the summer, because while I was supporting my wife, I got addicted to some drugs and I need to go to rehab. So the Gunkel takes his niece and nephew for the summer back with him, and they just have a blast. They learn how to grieve. It's just so fantastic and hilarious, and I loved every single page. It was awesome. Next book I want to talk about, what are we on? Number 10, top 10, Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. It just is. It's always going to be in my top, probably top 10. Always. Love the book. Love it. Number 9, we have Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. Again, another one that just a little outside of my comfort zone, yet had me jaw dropped throughout the book. So this one follows Louise. She's a single mom. She has a new job. She ends up going out one night, meets a man, sparks fly, they get flirting. She's kind of like, hey, maybe I'm finally moving on and found somebody. And then she goes to her brand new job on Monday, and the guy she flirted with is her new boss, and she meets his wife, and it goes from there. It's so good. Number 8 is Bird Box by Josh Mallory. And this one, again, a little outside my comfort zone, but a complete page turner for me. I remember carrying my Kindle like with me everywhere, reading as much as I could. So it kind of follows a little bit of a pandemic where something is outside that is causing people to basically lose their minds and either kill other people or kill themselves. And so in order to stay safe, you either have to stay inside with the blinds drawn all of the time, or if you're outside, you have to have a blindfold on. And it goes from there. It's just so fantastic. Number 7, we have Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. This was one of the first Colleen Hoover books that I ever read. So that's why I picked it. It resonated with me. And so we have our main character who meets her neighbor who lives across the street. He's a pilot, across the hall, I believe. He's a pilot and isn't really there all that much. And they're both kind of looking for a relationship, but not really a relationship. And so they're kind of, you know, using each other for comfort. And of course it doesn't just stay in the comfort zone and the friend zone. It goes from there and it's just so good. And I cried. I ugly cried. Number 6 is Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. This is a creepy book. And that's all I'm gonna say because I love the creepiness. Number 5, Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This one is more thriller than anything. And that's all I'm gonna say because you should just go into both of those blind. That's my opinion. Next one I have number 4, The Wife, the Maid, and the Mistress by Ariel Lawhon. I know this is like one of my favorites, not necessarily what a lot of other people's favorites, but I love Ariel Lawhon and how she takes current events and puts her own little, not current events, how she takes events that happened in the past and puts her little spin on it. So, summer night 1930, we have Judge Joseph Crater. He steps into a New York City cab and is never heard from again. And so this goes through understanding what the wife knows, what the maid knows, and what the mistress knows, and what actually happened. Well, what Ariel's take on what happened to Judge Joseph Crater is. And it's awesome. Number 3, this is a new book. This is the first book I read this year and it's made it into my top 3. I know. Lovely War by Julie Berry. Oh, I still have tabs in it. This is so fantastic and such a unique perspective. So we have World War I and World War II, more World War II represented here. And so we have the Greek gods basically, and they're kind of put in a position where we have a number of Greek gods, and basically they're coming together to tell this story of this couple who fell in love during war. And it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Like I said, I still have tabs in here. It's so fantastic. All right, top 2 books of all time. These are not going to be new books. These frequently switch spots on my list, but as of the time that I wrote this list, my number 2 book is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. One of the most beautiful books I've ever read. This follows 2 sisters as they survive France, 1939, World War II. We have Isabel and we have Vianne. Vianne stays home. She says goodbye to her husband as he goes off to fight and kind of holds down the home front. Isabel joins the rebellion, and it's just gorgeous. And my number 1 book of my top 40 that I highly, highly recommend to you guys, Storyteller by Jodi Picoult. Historical fiction, so dual timelines, but basically follows our main character Sage. She is a baker, and she kind of creates this very unlikely friendship with Joseph in town. Joseph is an older resident. He is beloved by everybody. He, I believe, taught at the local high school. Like, everyone loves Joseph, and they just kind of hit it off for some reason. And so he trusts Sage so much that he comes to her and basically says, I need you to kill me. I need you to kill me because I'm a horrible person. And tells her his story. And it is gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And sad and crazy. And oh my God, it's so awesome. So that is my number 1 book of all time. So those are the 40 best books that I have read in my 40 years so far. Comment below if you want to chat about any of them. I highly encourage you to do this. This was a little harder than I thought it was going to be. But thank you for coming and celebrating my birthday with me today. I appreciate it. Otherwise, like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye.